Good day, ladies and gentlemen. In the 90s, you had to be fast. If you were just a few months too late getting your game out, you could be left in the dust. And in the early 90s, it was even worse. Today's game, Corridor 7, was released in March of 1994, just a tiny little period after Doom. And in that tiny period, Doom made every single Wolfenstein 3D clone, of which Corridor 7 is, absolutely obsolete.
Corridor 7 was developed by Capstone Software and published by Intercore/GameTech. Corridor 7 is a first-person shooter of the Wolfenstein variety, but Capstone did manage to vary up the gameplay a tiny bit. See, in Wolf 3D, you fought enemies and then got to an elevator to progress to the next level, aka floor. In Corridor 7, now you must purge a certain number of enemies to unlock the elevator to progress. Depending on the difficulty level, you will have to hunt down all or most of the horrid abominations, and finding all or most Xenos is a pretty good challenge. Capstone used a remarkable amount of imagination when creating Corridor 7. This is not a straight clone of Wolf 3D or even a generic first-person shooter. This is in many ways a horror-based first-person shooter. First, you have the rather creepy levels that instill a sense of dread in the player. You have the enemies, and they are pretty cool and creepy. Instead of the traditional zombie or basic foot soldier, you fight an eyeball with guns on either side of it, and the rest of the abominations are still pretty creepy as well, and one can even shapeshift into random office furniture. You take a crap ton of damage when you get hit, and health kits are pretty hard to come by. Add in these slow and awkward turret controls, and you got yourself a pretty creepy experience. As with Wolf 3D and pretty much all first-person shooters of this era, you have the standard key hunt, but this time you are looking for a computer to update your clearance. Why you don't have unlimited clearance from the get-go? We wouldn't have a game, would we? Weapons in the game are pretty generic or just kind of bad. You start with the basic rifle and use it for a long bloody time. But then you get a plasma rifle that has an animated barrel, an alien plasma rifle, and a plasma rocket launcher. The actual shooting is not nearly as visceral as other first-person shooters, and it's in keeping with the horror aesthetic. Your enemies will take a decent amount of damage before going down, so you always kind of feel like you're on the back foot. Back in 1994, this would have been a novel experience, since the other shooters of the day were all about action. And to be honest, it's still a pretty neat experience today, and it wasn't until this review that I realized just how well Capstone did in creating a legitimately scary first-person shooter for that time. As a kid, I played the crap out of this game in the 90s, even after Doom came to dominate my computer time, as I loved the sci-fi aesthetic. But you want to know how many times I beat the game? 0. You want to know how many times I beat it after I got it working on DOSBox in 2008? 0. See, all that praise I just gave is undercut by the very nature of the Wolfenstein 3D clone. Once you've seen one level, you've seen them all. This is your lot, ladies and gentlemen, and for 40 levels, you hunt down Xenos, get keys, and get to the lift. No more, no less. And this means that the game gets real old real fast. Add the fact that the levels are all mazes, and add to that fact that the enemies are really tough and can kill you really quickly, and then add again the fact that you cannot just quick save and quick load, meaning you have to go through the menu to reload a save. This gets super dull and super tedious after about 20 goddamn minutes. So as a kid, I'd start playing the game, and after about 20 minutes, I'd get stuck in a level, and then just bail and head to Doom. The footage you are looking at here is from an old live stream recorded back in 2019, and I streamed this game for 4 bloody hours and had fun with it then. But man, did this game get old fast even then. Today, it's fashionable to mock this game and Capstone in general, because the game is rather dull and tedious, but that was endemic to all Wolfenstein 3D clones. Even Rise of the Triad to a certain extent got dull, as this was your lot. And that's why Doom was such a sea change for gaming. With all that in mind though, Corridor 7 is still a pretty neat game despite how tedious it can get. It is creepy and it is memorable. Capstone did the best with what they were given and should be commended for creating a game that at least tried to be different, even if it didn't quite succeed. So, since this game got shot down in flames by Doom, it's been pretty obscure for the last 30 years. There have been no source ports and no re-releases until recently. We finally got a re-release on Steam game, and it is of the CD version. You see, back in the 90s, you sometimes got two versions of a game. You had the flippy floppies and the CD-ROM. 700 megabytes, that's like 700 floppies, man! I played the floppy version as a kid, and this footage is from that version as well. For a time, getting the CD version to work was kind of worthless, as all it did was give you a couple FMV cutscenes at the beginning and some CD quality audio, along with even more levels, as if we needed those. If you want to get the game today, I'd recommend just getting the Steam version. It's a fun experience, for a little while at least, and it's super cheap on Steam, so you might get it, might not. I mean, I can't say that it's bad, but I'm not going to say it's good. Corridor 7 was and will always be, and also ran, but it can still hold its head up high, knowing that it did its best, and that best was alright. So, graphics. They don't look that bad. The various level details are well realized, and I was impressed back in the day, and today. I gotta say, this was a major improvement on Wolfenstein 3D, and unlike with Rise of the Triad, the game is not a chaotic mess, and the level details are able to make you feel like you're truly stalking through some shadowy government building. The floors are not textured, and the ceilings aren't either, although you will find lights on the ceiling here and there like in Wolfenstein 3D. Despite the limitations of the Wolf 3D engine, the devs at Capstone were able to give the game a spooky and oppressive atmosphere that still works, kind of, today. Weapon sprites are a bit of a mess, your rifle is just a block of pixels, as is pretty much everything else, except for the alien rifle. The enemies are still pretty impressive and are quite detailed, and each one is pretty distinct and not just copy-pasted generic foot soldiers. The animations are pretty okay. They are stiff with few frames, but since you will be scrambling to kill them before they take all of your precious health, you probably won't notice too much. So yeah, controls. We ain't got no source ports for this one, so we are back to arrow keys and the control and spacebar keys. How we survived in the days before WASD, I ain't got no idea. These are slow and clunky, and I found myself dying due to this too many bloody times to count. Music is severely underrated. It's better than the game! Capstone came up with some really good beats. Both Sound Blaster and CD audio tracks are catchy and really set the tone for the game. They are up-tempo, but still create an oppressive atmosphere. I highly recommend listening to some of them out of the game, as it is a great musical experience. Remarkably, the story ain't that bad, and as a kid, I loved the sense of mystery that it conveyed. In short, humanity found an alien artifact, brought it back to Earth, and all sorts of foul Xenos invaded the sanctity of Holy Terra. It's up to a lone Special Forces operator with a stocked automag pistol? Yeah, to purge the Xeno. And as you go through the game, you get introduced to creepier and creepier Xenos, and you start to see some of the levels becoming Xeno-formed, although you might get bored to tears before you find those levels. Sometimes a weird griblet monster will appear in front of you as a hologram and then disappear. As a kid, I ate this stuff up, and I wondered who the aliens were, why were they attacking humanity, and I never played long enough to find out. But hey, once again, at least Capstone tried. And that's the central thesis of the video. This is not a game worthy of ridicule. Yeah, it's not a very good game, but it's not really bad either. It was just limited by the nature of the Wolf 3D engine. Capstone showed that they had some imagination, and they did their damnedest to make a game that stood out. But like with Rise of the Triad, even if it had created Doom, I doubt it would have gotten that much more popular than it did, as Wolf 3D gameplay just got old fast, and even at the time, Corridor 7 didn't really do that much different to alleviate this, rockin' tunes notwithstanding.
If you haven't played it since you were a child, I do recommend checking out the Steam version and reconnecting with your inner child, at least until the game's tedium quashes it. I'm GeneralLotz, wishing you good Blake Stone and the Aliens of Gold, and good Rise of the Triad, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.